It could simply be the looming threat of lawsuits, or it could be that the attack on Andy Ngo was just outside the Overton window. If you're not familiar with the Overton window, it's basically, you've got the political compass, and then you've got a smaller box within it that moves around, and that window, Overton's window, is what is considered to be socially acceptable. It can be moved. It has been moved very far left. Now, you will find many people on the left claiming it's moved to the far right. It's actually not true. Absolutely not true. You've got kids today that are getting hormone therapy. You've got mainstream pride flags. The Overton window has moved to the left. You've got Bernie Sanders, who claims to be a socialist. He's kind of not. But you've actually got Democrats moving to the far left. That's where the Overton window has gone. Something interesting happened. The attack on Andy Ngo, it wasn't, I don't want to say it's just too far to the left that triggered all these people, because at first people defended or excused it, which says to me it was just a little bit outside. If it was a more egregious attack, if Andy Ngo was more severely injured, it would have fallen outside the Overton window. But because it was a beatdown, you had journalists from the New York Times, from Kotaku, and other big mainstream publications saying, well, Andy Ngo isn't a journalist. Stop calling him that. And we saw many people on the left excuse or defend the attack. But something interesting has happened. It may be due to the potential lawsuit, or the public is not willing to accept a gay child of immigrants being brutally beaten in the street. Here we have a story from the New York Post by John Levine. Biden condemns violent Antifa assault on conservative journalist Andy Ngo. What's interesting about this, and the title speaks for itself, there's a statement issued by Biden, is we'll jump over to the actual tweet from John, and he said, reps for Harris, Sanders, Gillibrand, and Booker all ignored repeated inquiries from me on the subject. It's interesting. Biden was willing to condemn it. Why? Well, because Biden he's Obama-era politician. I think Biden is stuck between a rock and a hard place, where he wants to win the nomination, but he's not a far-left socialist type identitarian. So he kind of has to pander to them, but unfortunately it won't be enough. The woke left will ensure that a woke leftist wins the Democratic primary and then soundly loses to Donald Trump in 2020. We'll see, though. I don't want to make hard predictions. Everybody tried predicting what was going to happen in 2016. They lost. Now, outside of what we saw with Joe Biden, apparently now John Levine is saying the Human Rights Campaign has issued a statement. For those that aren't familiar with what happened, Charlotte Clymer is communications for the Human Rights Campaign, who said it was actually, I'll pull up the tweet from John Levine. Charlotte Clymer said that Andy Ngo intentionally provokes people on the left to drive his content. That is a statement of fact. Andy Ngo doesn't do this. Being attacked today on video taken by an actual journalist is the greatest thing that could ever happen to his career. You know it. I know it. He knows it. We all know it. Going on to say violence is completely wrong, and I find it sad and weak to allow a sniveling weasel like Andy Ngo to get under one's skin like this. But I'm also not going to pretend that this wasn't Ngo's goal from the start. I mean, let's cut the S here. This is what they do. But so I believe the statement from the Human Rights Campaign probably has to do with the looming lawsuit for which they will be a target of. Charlotte Clymer said Andy Ngo does this. Okay, congratulations. You made a statement of fact. Well, here's what's interesting. HRC has now condemned it, and Charlotte Clymer issued an apology in multiple tweets. Check this out. Statement on the attack against Andy Ngo. The Human Rights Campaign issued the following statement on the horrific attack against Andy Ngo in Portland, Oregon over the weekend. Quote, we condemn violence in the strongest possible terms, and the perpetrators of this attack must be held accountable. Furthermore, if there is any evidence that this crime falls under the state or federal hate crimes laws, this should be thoroughly investigated by the FBI and prosecuted to the maximum extent. Clymer went on to issue a 4-tweet sincere apology, saying, I want to clarify comments I made earlier this weekend about the assault on Andy Ngo. Although I stated that violence is completely wrong and would never claim it was deserved, I failed to unequivocally condemn what took place and make clear that no person deserves what happened to him. The only fact necessary to be recognized is that he was attacked by thugs because of his political views. In our country, to say nothing of elsewhere in the world, that should always be wrong, and it was wrong of me to contextualize his assault. no matter how I feel about his record of diminishing and excusing discrimination and violence against transgender people. I sincerely apologize to Andy No, and I am sorry at how poorly my comments reflected on my colleagues at the Human Rights Campaign, who resolutely stand against all violence. Clymer did not correct the record on stating that Andy No does a thing intentionally. Now, it's possible Clymer could argue that it's just an opinion. Based on the things he's published, I think he's doing this. And because they're both public figures, yeah, it's really hard to sue over this. However, I will state, first and foremost, apology appreciated. Although the apology is not directed at me, I respect and recognize the apology. I always will. I don't care, who you are. You always get one, okay? You want to come out and you want to apologize, I encourage the good behavior. I will make a point to say that I have seen a lot of apologies, and this to me does seem more like it was reflecting very poorly on the HRC, and they probably got a lot of questions about a gay journalist being attacked and why HRC was, essentially excusing or defending the attack because of Clymer. So I will, look, I'm not entirely convinced of the sincerity, but you know what? I will say this. Regardless of how you feel, regardless of if you think this is sincere or not, it doesn't matter. Clymer apologized, and we should all respectfully accept the apology. It is up to Andy No to determine whether or not he's satisfied. The apology is at him. But I will say absolutely my respect, and I guess it's the best way I can put it. Thank you for the apology. It's greatly appreciated. And I hope if more people come out and say it was wrong and they apologize over what happened, then we can actually see kind of a de-escalation. So there's some good news here in that, I've been pretty bullish on some kind of civil conflict. I don't want to say civil war because that just makes people think it's going to be like the 1800s with two sides clashing. I don't think so. What I think it's going to be is like insurgency, people popping up and doing crazy things to a more extreme degree, like actual lethal force. But this gives me hope that maybe it can pull back. I didn't think the attack on No would shock the system enough to actually get people to apologize to No and to condemn the violence. But here we are. So it's more than just, Joe Biden. We haven't seen everybody, but, we are seeing the HRC come out. I am now hearing as well, many journalists who are defending Antifa have been quietly deleting tweets and pulling back their statements. It's one of the most dangerous things you can do at any point in your life to defend a faction of individuals who have engaged in violence. And that goes for the Proud Boys just as much. In DC, there was an incident where several Proud Boys were, whether it was intentional or not, were hooting at some old woman because they thought she was some journalist they knew. The woman was terrified, and apparently now there is potentially a story about an old woman who was being, yelled at by Proud Boys who were saying things like, "We know where you are," and I don't know exactly what happened, so I'm not going to get into the full details. But you see, people eventually get out of control, right? If you justify it long enough. We can look at what the Proud Boys did in New York City. The argument was that Antifa showed up to their event at some conservative club, and so they got into a fight. And it was contentious, the argument over who started the fight. You can see on one video Antifa throwing a bottle. Later, we saw a video of the Proud Boys actually running towards Antifa before they threw the bottle. Here's the important part, though. Whether you think it was right or wrong for the fight to break out, fights happen. Afterwards, on a live stream, the Proud Boys were like, at least one guy was excitedly talking about bashing someone's face into the ground. And that's when you can see, when you defend any group, it will come back to haunt you. Antifa, I think, is, several orders of magnitude worse than the Proud Boys. The Proud Boys are guilty of having bad opinions, but for the most part, they don't show up to like pride events and these events and start fights with people. They do host their, rallies, and then Antifa shows up and fights. And I'm not acting like the Proud Boys don't go to some events, but for the most part, the Proud Boys do their thing, Antifa shows up. It's flowing in one direction. The point I'm making is, there will come a time where something truly bad happens, and we've seen several instances, right? Gavin McInnes had to disavow and leave the group. Well, now we might start seeing something similar with Antifa. You've got a lot of journalists deleting tweets, regretting they ever praised the group. Why? At one point, the mob... Actually, I'll do this. You ever see the movie The Animal with Rob Schneider? If you're not familiar, it's been a long time, but basically Rob Schneider gets like hit by a car or something, I don't remember, and this mad scientist guy puts a bunch of animal parts in him. And this makes Rob Schneider act like a bunch of different animals. Eventually, an angry mob forms, and they're trying to hunt him down with pitchforks and torches. And then they find him, but Rob Schneider's black friend says he's the animal, and then all of a sudden the mob goes like, whoa, oh man, like nobody wants to be a part of a mob that attacks a black guy. The joke of the story was that, they didn't want to be a racist mob. They didn't mind attacking Rob Schneider, even though I think Rob Schneider's Jewish, but that was the joke, right? So the reason I bring that up is eventually the mob of people who are totally happy to attack Trump supporters and conservatives and accuse them of being Nazis eventually got to a point where they're staring now at a gay Asian beaten and in the hospital with a brain hemorrhage. And now this is the mob saying, I don't want to be a part of a group that attacks, someone like Andy Ngo. So now they're quietly removing and deleting their tweets. I'm not going to say it's all sincere. I think people are realizing now they've exposed themselves. Their careers are in jeopardy. And this is why they're pulling back and they're scared. It happens on the right. But Antifa, for the longest time, got a free pass from the media. And now the media is actually embarrassed because Andy Ngo was attacked. Heaven forbid something worse happens to Andy. Yesterday we heard, John Levine reported that Andy Ngo's lawyer said he was admitted to the hospital for a second time based on medical advice. Quote, he is likely going to require some ongoing treatment for neurological issues. And there you have it. The real risk here that I think people are seeing is that, what you're seeing on the screen for those that are watching, this is Andy Ngo's lawyer. The risk here is Andy Ngo isn't out of the woods in terms of his injuries. If something really bad happens, all of these people who praised Antifa, well, they're going to be in serious trouble now. Antifa is a terrorist organization, be it intentionally decentralized. They wear masks and they do this so they can get away with what they do and claim they're not an organization. They are. And DHS and FBI have labeled their actions as terrorist violence. So now we can see that there is a line that's been crossed. However, the line was only crossed ever so slightly because for a while, people were defending it. In fact, some people still are. This was not so far outside the Overton window that everyone condemned it. They're still trying to push the Overton window. In fact, while this may look like decent de-escalation, it might actually be the opposite. This might actually be enough to say, like, well, it was bad, but, and they'll carry on with their but. Even though some higher profile individuals have denounced it, we've seen a few Democrats, Biden, Eric Swalwell, Andrew Yang. Where are the other Democrats? They're not. So this may actually still be escalation. But I'll leave it there. The final thought, the point I want to get across for this video is it's really interesting now to see a lot of people embarrassed that at any point they ever supported this identitarianism and this violence, and now they have to pull back because it might actually hurt their careers and cost them money. Anyway, stick around. Next segment will be coming up at 4 p.m. YouTube.com/Timcast. It is a different channel, and I will see you all there.